Yesterday in the Crown Court, the jury heard how Dr. Dennis Holt Matthews had been accused of carrying out an abortion on his daughter Gail without her consent. The accusation was made in a letter written by tennis star Roddy Maitland shortly before he tried to kill himself. He recovered and is now facing a charge of criminal libel. As the trial enters its second day, Gail Holt Matthews is in the witness box, being questioned by junior counsel for the Crown, Mr. Dealey.
Your name is Gail Matthews?
Yes.
You live at the Old Forge, Medley Green?
That's right.
And you're 16 years of age. Miss Holt Matthews, I'm afraid I shall have to ask you some rather personal questions, but you do understand the importance of answering them frankly.
Yes, of course.
Now, could you tell the court how you first met the accused?
Well, he was playing in a charity match at the Fulchester Lawn Tennis Club, and I asked him for his autograph.
And after that, a friendship developed.
Yes, he came once or twice to stay with friends nearby, and we met several times.
At the tennis club?
Usually, but he also came to our home and met my parents.
And at some time during these visits, intercourse took place.
Yes.
When did you first learn that you were pregnant?
In the middle of May, my father told me after he'd examined me.
And this was the first that you knew of it?
I wasn't sure.
Mr. Dealey, could you persuade your witness to speak up? I'm having difficulty in hearing her replies.
She said she wasn't sure, my lord. Was there any doubt in your mind as to who was the father of your child?
Of course not. It was Roddy.
And did he know of your condition?
Well, he was in America when I found out, and I wanted to write to him, but Daddy wouldn't let me. When he got back to England, he phoned me, and I told him then.
And did he make any suggestions as to what should be done?
What kind of suggestions?
Well, did he talk about getting married?
No, I don't think so.
Did you talk about it?
Well, I didn't want to worry him. It was just before Wimbledon.
He must have been worried already just finding out about the child.
No, I don't think so. He always said he was very fond of children.
Would you have married him if he'd have asked you?
I don't think my father would have let me.
Not even with a baby on the way?
I think he'd rather it was adopted. You see, he never liked Roddy, really.
And what are your feelings towards the accused now?
I have no feelings about him one way or the other. There's nothing to hold us together anymore.
And because you've lost the baby?
Yes.
Would you tell the court all that you can remember of the evening in question?
I don't remember very much. It was just before dinner time. I wasn't feeling very well. Mummy was in the kitchen and Daddy had just finished evening surgery and was reading the paper in the lounge. I went into my bedroom and I must have fainted because when I came to, I was lying on the couch in Daddy's surgery.
And you can't remember anything that happened in between that?
No, nothing. Daddy told me afterwards that honestly, I can't tell you anything. It's all so mixed up and... I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Miss Holt Matthews, are we to understand that since the day you found out you were pregnant by Mr. Maitland, your only contact with him has been one telephone call which he made to you?
Yes, that's right.
And yet until your alleged miscarriage, there was at first the possibility that you and he would marry.
A possibility, nothing definite.
Now, doesn't it seem rather strange that you made no attempt to talk things over with him?
My father said I couldn't.
Do you always do everything your father tells you?
Yes, usually.
Not only on the tennis court, but at home as well?
He's my father. He knows what's best for me.
So whatever your own inclination might be, you would fall in with your father's suggestions.
Well, what do you mean exactly?
Do you really remember nothing of what happened when you fainted in your bedroom?
No, absolutely nothing.
You were unconscious for a whole half hour, totally oblivious of what was going on?
I'd banged my head, apparently.
You remember your father being there?
Well, yes, dimly.
What do you mean, dimly? What was he doing?
I don't think he was doing anything. When I opened my eyes, he was sitting in the armchair having supper.
And before that, Miss Holt Matthews?
I've told you I don't remember anything.
You don't remember? or you prefer not to?
You know, Miss Tate, it does seem that this witness can tell us very little of what happened. I think you will have to accept her statement that she was unconscious at the material time.
Very well, my lord. Now, Miss Holt Matthews, I have only one more question for you. If at any time an abortion was performed on you, would it have been with your consent?
I don't think I understand.
Now, I'm putting it as clearly as I can. Would you, under any circumstances, have agreed to the deliberate destruction of your child?
No!
Thank you.
Have you any further questions for this witness, Mr. Dealey?
No, my lord.
Very well. You may leave the witness box, Miss Holt Matthews.
We should like to call Mrs. Holt Matthews, please, Your Honour.
Very well.
What religion are you, please?
Seriously.
Take the Bible in your right hand and read the words on the card.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Is your full name Mrs. Verity Jane Holt Matthews?
Yes.
And do you live at the Old Forge, Medley Green?
Yes, I do.
You are the mother of the last witness.
Yes.
Well, now, Mrs. Holt Matthews, will you cast your mind back to your first meeting with the accused?
Roddy?
Yes.
It must have been sometime last spring. Gail brought him to the house.
Well, can you tell us, what was your impression that you formed of him on this first occasion?
Well, I was really rather surprised to find that he was so nice.
Surprised? Why was that?
Well, I know one shouldn't believe everything one reads, but the sports writers did make him sound rather...
Rather what, Mrs. Holt Matthews?
They were always calling him the bad boy of tennis, things of that sort. So it came as quite a shock to find that he was really very nice.
And what were your feelings about his friendship with your daughter?
At first, you mean? It didn't bother me at all. She was only a child, and she'd never shown any interest in boys. Her whole life was devoted to tennis, really. I just thought it rather splendid that he should take such an interest in her.
Did you have any reason to change this first opinion?
Yes. When I found out that Gail was going to have a baby, naturally I was deeply shocked. She's no more than a child herself. I thought it quite dreadful.
Did you speak to the accused about it?
No, I had no opportunity. My husband wouldn't let him in the house after we found out. And anyhow, the shock and worry of it all made me quite ill. I had to go into a private nursing home for a week to
Yes.
get over it.
But you were back by June the 15th.
Oh, yes,
Can you remember that day, Mrs. Holt Matthews?
very clearly. It was the servant's day off. We have a Portuguese woman who cleans and does the cooking. I was getting the supper ready. I asked Gail to help me, but she said she wasn't feeling very well, so I told her she'd better go and lie down.
Lie down where?
In her bedroom.
Go on, please.
After a few minutes, I heard a crash, as though someone had fallen over.
Did you go and investigate?
Yes, after I turned the cooker off and so forth. But by the time I got to Gail's room, my husband was already there. Gail was lying on the floor. He said she'd fainted.
Did you notice any injuries?
No, but she seemed to be breathing very strangely. And of course my first thought was that, being pregnant, she might have damaged herself internally.
Yes, of course. Did you then go to the surgery?
Yes, we picked her up and carried her between us and put her there on a couch.
After which you felt that there was nothing you could do to help, so you went back to the kitchen.
Well, I wanted to help, but my...
But having no medical experience, you felt that you might possibly be in the way.
Yes, I suppose.
But you did return to the surgery later.
Yes, about 15 or 20 minutes later, I went in and asked my husband whether she was all right. He said she was still unconscious and he'd better stay with her. I asked what about supper, and he said he'd have something on a tray.
Which you subsequently brought.
Yes.
And when you went into the surgery on that occasion, did you see your daughter?
I didn't go into the surgery. I put the tray down in the passage. It was afterwards that I went in, about 20 minutes later.
Was Gail still there?
Yes, she was lying on the couch, looking very pale. She must have lost a lot of blood.
Was she conscious?
Just, yes.
Now, Mrs. Holt Matthews, I have to ask you this. Did you see any evidence that an operation had taken place?
What kind of evidence?
Any surgical equipment, any anesthetic apparatus?
No, nothing of that kind.
Did you have any reason to believe that an abortion had taken place?
No, absolutely none.
Did you discuss all this later with your daughter?
No, we didn't talk about it really very much. I think she wanted to forget about it all. I'm sure I did.
Did she give any indication of her feelings towards the accused?
She said she didn't want to see him anymore.
Now, Mrs. Holt Matthews, do you remember June the 29th?
Was that the semi-finals? Yes. My husband and I watched it on the television. Gail said she didn't want to. I must say it really was a rather shocking exhibition. We were still talking about it hours later when he actually turned up.
Who turned up?
Roddy. He must have driven up from London.
Did you see him?
No. My husband went to the door, but of course wouldn't let him in. There was no point. Gail didn't want to speak to him, and I certainly didn't.
Now, will you tell the court what happened after that?
Yes. My husband was called out unexpectedly to see a patient, and Gail was in her room playing records. So I was sitting by myself in the lounge. This was about 11:30.
Yes, Mrs. Holt Matthews?
The telephone rang, and when I answered it, it was Roddy asking if he could speak to Gail. I said no, certainly not. And then he became very abusive and started saying all sorts of dreadful things.
Now, Mrs. Holt Matthews, this is most important. Can you remember exactly what he said?
He accused my husband of murdering the baby. He said something about seeing that he was punished.
Punished? In what way?
He said he would see to it that everybody knew what sort of man my husband was. He would make it impossible for him to practice anymore. He kept on saying, murderer, murderer, murderer.